Good morning. I have no idea if this was rolling. My timer says 12 seconds have passed. Oh my. I apologize for that. Some technical difficulty, but you are not here to hear about my technical difficulty. We are going to start a series on all things nonprofit boards, and we are so excited. Today's show, we are going to talk about what you can anticipate for the next several weeks in terms of topics. Do you have a fully engaged board, or do you struggle to even get your board members to meetings? Nonprofit boards are an essential component of a nonprofit organization. In fact, they can make or break your agency. So join us as we talk about all things nonprofit boards.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Coffee Time with Masterminds. My name is Peta Blakely, and I'm the founder and principal of Blakely Consulting.
Welcome to Coffee Time with Masterminds. I am Cynthia Rojas, founder and principal of To Your Growth.
Welcome to Coffee Time with Masterminds. I'm Rebecca Tuttle, founder and principal of Grant Right Now and Grant Writing for Good.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Coffee Time with Masterminds, a 30-minute show for and with leaders of nonprofit mission-based organizations. We welcome our viewers in the USA and our listeners in Australia. Welcome. And if you are listening to us or viewing us today, put your name and where you're from in the comments. We always want to hear where our viewers are coming from. So, you are watching Coffee Time with Masterminds. I am Cynthia Rojas, and I want to bring on my co-host, Peta Blakely.
Good morning.
Hi, Peta. You can tell I'm a little excited.
I'm excited too. I have a lot of questions about this topic.
Yeah.
I've been on boards. I have worked with boards, but I'm still not really sure how they're supposed to work. So.
Yeah. I love that. I think there are board members who don't know how they're supposed to work.
Absolutely.
So you're not alone. Yeah, this topic and making it a series is inspired by the fact that a day doesn't go by that I don't hear either about an issue or hear how a board member or a board of directors is helping or moving an organization along or hindering an organization. Yeah. So we figured, well, it's a major component of a nonprofit organization. There are legal ramifications and legal implications to being on a board, but also having a board as a nonprofit. So why not talk about it?
Absolutely.
Here we are.
This is great.
Yeah.
And this is a good time. I think a lot of organizations are sort of in a reset, and the board is where, is the place to start.
Well, we are, let's jump to that part of the conversation, which is how boards have changed since COVID-19, right? So your traditional board role may be looking a little differently these days. And I just want to turn it over to you, Peta. Have you experienced anything in your organizations in terms of shifts in board role or responsibility?
Well, I don't know that I have a sample, right? I've seen a lot. I think I've been hearing a lot of conversations about what level the board should be involved at.
Yeah.
And is part of this that they, maybe, I think you probably know better than I do, that they had to get more actively involved in day-to-day work during COVID because there was more work, or there was less staff, or there were new initiatives. And in my experience, it's always bad when you have board members in operations.
Yes.
So, and we could talk about why, right? You could probably fill in from a more theoretical perspective why it's bad. So I think what I'm hearing is some conversations about distinguishing between board, big picture strategy work, and staff, every day getting things done work. What about you?
Yeah, so that's exactly what's happening, right? Boards look a little differently. Traditionally, you did not want your board to be involved in personnel matters, right?
Yeah.
The only personnel matters your board should be involved in is in hiring, evaluating, and supporting the leader of the organization.
Yeah.
There is a very clear separation of duty, much like we have in our three branches of government.
Yep.
Do not make me say what they are, but I know.
And this is really important. The way I understand it is the board hires and manages the executive director, and they trust them.
Yes.
They trust them to do their job. When the board is
Yes.
going around the executive director and doing anything under the executive director,
Yes.
they are signifying that they don't trust them. And it would be better if they replaced them with somebody that they did trust. That's how I see it.
Yes. And I see it so many times with the board, with their board members that are just aligning with staff and bypassing the ED. And it's never good. No good has ever come out of it.
I think it also it gives the board members too much of an on the ground perspective, right?
Yes.
Their job is to be thinking high level and 5 to 10 years out, right? And understanding what's going on here and now and today is kind of a distraction to them doing their job well. Would you see it that way?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, EDs may consult with their board about personnel issues, but board members should be clear that they're either playing an expert role because they're an employment attorney, or they're an HR expert, or they're playing a supportive role, right? So if I don't handle conflict really well and I have a staff member that's confrontational and I want to speak to my board chair who oversees 100 people and deals with this all the time, let's be clear that I'm going to you in a supportive role, right? And so that happens because board members are also there to guide executive directors. So, yeah. But
so let me give some background. Why do we have boards?
Yeah.
So, I mean, because I think a lot of organizations, small organizations set them up because they have to, right?
Yeah.
As part of their 501c3 process or whatever process, but they might not know why from an organizational perspective they're doing that. So can you give a little bit of that context?
I did a little bit of history checking, and boards, and I don't know if they were already existing in other countries, but our settlers brought about the concept or designed the concept of boards of directors. And it all started with this organization. And you know what? Massachusetts, that should be like the capital of the US. They're always
I would get behind that idea.
You guys rock. The Massachusetts Bay Company is the first company to have a set of board of directors. And what they wanted is really a different way of leading an organization. Now, the article was really complicated and it had something to do with state laws and government and what role does government play. And so a lot of our settlers were coming in and building enterprises, right? And so this private ownership thing, again, really complicated. But the idea of building a company that would be ran or run by 13 men, and it did say men, instead of one, was a new concept, right? And then, so this is in the 1600s, right? This is interesting. So they were all men and they were chosen for their honesty, their wisdom, and their expertise. That was the criteria. I don't think that much has changed in terms of what we look for in our board members. I think you do want expertise is really important.
Mhm.
Wisdom is really important, and of course, we all want honest people.
Yeah.
But to talk about the legal reasons is that because they are tax exempt, they
Mhm.
are designed to have a body of people independent of the organization. So these are external individuals that oversee the organization to make sure that it's doing what it's supposed to do
Got it.
and keep its tax exempt status. So that's the legal reason.
Mhm.
That's the legal reason. Now there are three, so I could go on with my little background, and then we'll
Yeah.
move into more interesting stuff. But there are really just three, well, not just, but there are three main duties of a board, and they are duty of care, making sure that we use all of our assets, and this includes facilities and people and all that good stuff, that we are
Mhm.
running an organization, right?
Yep.
Duty of loyalty, and that we are following our mission in all that we do, and we are taking care of any conflicts of interest. And then duty of obedience, where we are following the laws and regulations of both the state and also our very own bylaws. Those are our primary legal duties. Yeah. So as we move on, though, I'm going to do more fact checking, because I think that in the same article, Harvard University and Yale University are named as part of this issue of boards and universities, and these universities were just starting, and there was a lot of conflict and difference of opinion in how they should be ran. So lots of good stuff that will be coming up. This is our primer show. That is definitely one of them. What is the history, and what does it look like today? But I thought that we'd take that you and I could talk a little bit about, have boards changed? Right.
Yeah.
So
Right. I mean, I think a lot of people think that the board's primary function is fundraising.
yeah.
And so that's something to talk about.
Yes.
And but there's some ways I agree, some ways that I disagree. I think we're also, when you talked about those responsibilities of honesty and wisdom and expertise, I think that we're starting to define expertise differently and more broadly, right? And so now organizations are starting to be very conscientious about having more diversity on the board, especially having more lived experience on the board. Whereas we used to just define expertise in a way that was very exclusionary, often very exclusionary of the populations being served or people with lived experience.
Yeah, I was thinking about that, and when I read off the three criteria for the first known set of board members in the U.S., I thought it was interesting that wisdom was one of them, right? Different from expertise, right? We are wiser because of our lived experiences. But something happened along the way that for some reason these voluntary organizations started to feel that wisdom came from a very specific kind of person or a certain population. And what we're finding today is that wisdom runs the gamut. If you are a youth serving organization and you do not have young people on your board, I ask that you evaluate that, right? There is wisdom that you are missing out on.
Yeah.
Because although we've all been teenagers, I think many of us have forgotten what that feels like. And we're not teenagers today.
We're not teenagers in today's environment. It's different.
Yeah. So I think we moved away from that wisdom piece, and we're trying to bring that back.
Yeah.
And really look at wisdom as a key characteristic. And I think that's what COVID did. Well, not COVID, what happened 3 months into the pandemic with the murder of George Floyd. It
Yeah.
really, and he was not the first to be murdered, and unfortunately will not be the last, or has not been the last. But I'll tell you this, what his murder did to our universe and to our nation has been astronomical,
Yeah.
right? And really forced or really encouraged board members to look at their DE&I, to look
Yeah.
at what really diversity and inclusion means, because there are things happening and those 13 men may not know what to do.
Yes. Yep. And this goes back to the origins of not-for-profit work, right? And a very like paternalistic approach, a very unprofessional approach, where people who came from outside of the community would come and say what was best for this community
Yeah,
from the perspective of,
we have a lot of that still.
yeah, yes, we still have a lot of that. We got to kind of undo that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the people that I want to bring on the series is a woman. She's so funny. Is a woman who has enormous diversity on her board.
Yeah.
And I think this is her first role as an ED. And can you believe she didn't think there was another way? So when people ask her,
Mhm.
how'd you get parents on your board? She's like, well, don't you have parents on your board?
That's,
Ask her,
yeah.
how
would you
do
put together a board without them? Yeah.
Right. How do you get black and brown people on your board? She's like,
You don't have
all my
any
board members are black and brown. She's like, to her, it's so normal. And so I
Right.
really want to bring her on the show because she doesn't see it any other way.
I talked to a man a long time ago. He was the executive director of an organization in Boston, African American man, and he had an incredibly diverse board, a majority minority board, and he also had a huge give or get. So this is coming back to fundraising, right? And some board members are obligated to either donate or to fundraise from their friends large amounts of money.
Yeah.
Look forward to hearing what you think about that. But without sacrificing his give or get, he had this majority minority board, and complete disdain for people who said, oh, well, like we just can't have any people of color on our board because they're required to fundraise $100,000.
Mhm.
It's like, that's
How did he
ridiculous.
do it?
Yeah, he did it. It's not a problem.
Oh, you know what? I want you to bring him on the show.
We'll work on it for next year. Yeah.
Yeah. So, you've named some other responsibilities. So there are the three legal ones: duty of care, obedience, and I forget the third one. Duty of loyalty. But there are other responsibilities, right? They are the accountable voice, right? They are to serve as ambassadors. There are some boards that are expected to fundraise, which I want to say I am against. I want to write a book called the non-fundraising board, because I think first of all, when many of us think of the word fundraising, we have one thing in our mind for most of us, and that's, I am not going to ask my friends for money. And until we get rid of that perception, we should not be we should not use the word fundraising, because it looks differently for board members. It's more ambassadorship. Can your board speak about your organization, right? So, but we are going to talk about that, but I'm highly against that. And then they should also be working with the ED and staff, if that's appropriate, on strategic direction. And I purposely say with the ED, because if you are a board that is doing the strategic direction for the organization, I need you to check yourself. Are you the right person to do that?
Okay.
Right? Without knowing the day-to-day operations. So you want to do that in partnership. Yeah. How else have boards been disrupted?
I mean, I think the piece that you talked about more diversity and equity is a really interesting one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, are you seeing board compositions change?
They're trying to change.
Okay.
You know, unfortunately for us, I am not sure why in that trio, why diversity got there first, right? Is the first word. And maybe it's because you need diversity to have inclusion. No, you can have inclusion which breeds diversity, whatever. A lot of boards stop at the diversity number.
Yeah.
At the diversity part of the DE&I. And what I am hearing, because I talk to leaders all the time and I talk to board members, is I had a board member tell me the other day, I said, what inspires you to be on this board? And she said, are you kidding me? I was asked because I'm Black.
Yeah.
And I thought, that's got to feel not good.
Yeah.
And I have to tell you, a lot of people have told me that since then, a lot of Black and brown people. So when you stop at the diversity, it doesn't help the organization, right? Because we're different. We see the world in a different way. We see philanthropy in a very different way. We see the social service sector in a different way. We see art differently. And we see this concept of boards, I tell people all the time, is more of an American construct. I don't know one person that's ever told me, when I grow up, I want to be a board member. I in all the dinners I've had with my peers, no one has ever said, I cannot wait to serve on a board.
No.
It's just not something that comes up.
No.
So people from a different culture have to be cultivated into learning what boards are. If I told my mom, who by the way is very fluent in English, Mom, I sit on the board of the ASPCA or the American Red Cross, she would look at me and be like, what is that?
Why?
She would actually yell at me because she says, there you go, volunteering your time again. Do they pay you? No, man, this is an unpaid position. How many hours a month? Oh, about 10 to 15.
And maybe that is part of the diversity, equity, and inclusion conversation. Maybe they should be paid.
Yeah, because originally board members were meant to be wealthy because this is how you build up these social sectors. I mean, the federal government had a lot to do with building nonprofit organizations, but they've never fully funded them. So they've always, they originally were recruiting people who had money that could donate. And so that needs to change. It needs to change. The federal government needs to be responsible for our nonprofit boards. For our nonprofit organizations. And we should pay individuals. Another thing that has changed since COVID is that there is more board participation in day-to-day operations. And I'll tell you what.
And why do you think that's happening?
I'm sorry?
Why do you think that's happening?
Yeah, because COVID is very complex and no one has gone through it, right? No one
need more support.
Alive that has led through a global pandemic. And so what EDs have needed is really the support and the wisdom and the expertise of board members as we think about huge organizational shifts. Like we're going to go from having an office to having some of our staff work remotely. That's a different kind of business model, right? That needs some thinking. It needs policies, it needs thinking, it needs a budget, it needs, we need to look at the budget implications. It's big. And so board members are helping leaders in that regard. Since COVID, we have been very intentional, or leaders have been very intentional to ensuring that staff are at the center of organization, right? So we used to think of staff as doing the work for the client, and it was always about the client. But COVID taught us that our staff are people too, and that their health, their safety, their well-being is just as instrumental as it is to care for those that we are serving.
Mhm.
And so that's a huge organizational shift for some nonprofits, right? I know nonprofits that are shutting down next week. The whole organization. I think we had a
I know
conversation.
for-profits that are shutting down next week.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's just a different culture. Yeah.
That's a huge thing. It has budget implications. It has liability implications.
Yep.
Potentially,
Mhm.
it does require the board to make some decisions and to make these things formal. So,
One of the things I've been hearing is an emphasis on voice and inclusion in the organization. Right?
uh-huh.
And so people, what it sounds like to me is leaders want to include everybody in the organization in every decision, right?
Yeah.
And then there's some tension around whether that's an organizational structure or a culture, right? And I wonder if that, does that contribute to some of the confusion about what the role of board members is?
This is really interesting. I had a conversation the other day, I don't remember with whom,
Yeah.
about worker-led organizations.
Yeah.
I was actually told of two. One is right on my desk in a post-it note that I am going to contact. I don't know. I don't
Yeah.
know.
And I
To
think
answer
part
the
of that is, so there's just real fear, right? Going back to our workforce topic, right? Employers are a little nervous about their workers leaving right now. And,
Yeah.
they're a little frantic about keeping them happy. So is including them in every decision maybe a reaction or an overreaction to that?
I love
Um,
that.
Yeah. But I also think it might be partly a response to COVID, to that, like, boy,
Yeah.
for 2 years, we haven't really known what we're doing. And right, maybe we can
Yeah.
get some more advice.
Some of us,
Yeah,
some of us still don't know what we're doing.
that's how we live now.
And then there is risk management. So our managing of risk has elevated because now we have safety issues, right? Some of the things that nonprofits had to deal with early on is, do we pay employees for when they're sick with this deadly virus? This is early in the pandemic. Or do
Yeah.
we make them use their sick days? Right? What do we do when someone is ill? Do we enforce mask wearing in the workplace? What happens when we infect somebody and we have a super, what's it called?
Yeah,
A super
spreader. Yeah.
spreader.
Yeah, so a lot of organizations have been letting everybody participate in decisions because they need everybody to feel comfortable with it.
Yes.
And so
Yes.
that is probably just infiltrating into other kinds of decisions.
Yeah. So a lot has changed. A lot has changed. And so this is going to be a very interesting series. And we are going to start it with an author of a book that I think is amazing called Stop the Blame Game. It is about from his perspective, he thinks that there is a role for EDs in truly engaging their board to help them become high performing board members.
Yeah.
And so I think it's a great book, and he's coming on later in January, and that's going to start our board series. Before that, we are going to do some introductory or start of the new year kind of conversation. So I'm excited about that as well.
So these are going to be really great shows for executive directors, current board members, and especially for new board members.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this is the end of this show.
Yep.
And I want to say thank you to our viewers and to our listeners. And we look forward to seeing you during the board series, but also next week at 10:30. Thank you. Have a great weekend.